My name is Annette Thompson. My title is Chief Learning Officer, Senior Vice President with Farmers Insurance, and my responsibilities are that of the Chief Learning Officer. So I have accountability for the technological development or technical development of the farmers' employees, farmers' distribution force, as well as the professional development of our employees, as well as the development of top talent. In today's changing business, it's very important that the CLO, in my view, is really a business expert. It used to be an environment where it was sufficient to be a learning and development expert, and what has to happen in today's world is that person has to have a combination of both. They have to be an expert in the business, they have to understand learning and development and talent development. And the reason that's so important is because, in today's world, it's absolutely critical that the CLO is delivering against the organizational imperatives, the strategic imperatives of the company. And to have that consultative relationship is so important that they understand the business so that they're deemed as a consultant, they're deemed as a business partner, and that's so critical in today's environment. I also think what's critical in today's environment is the opportunity for our CLOs to be in a situation where they really appreciate the value of learning and learning agility, creating that learning culture within the organization, because in today's dynamic environment, with regard to the business, it's really important that we start to create a learning agility within the organization. And to do that, our learning professionals, our CLOs, have to have that learning agility so that they can foster and emulate that importance of learning within the organization. So in today's world, I think the CLO is ability to stay in pace with what's happening organizationally, or rather what's happening in the learning space, because it's changing so fast. I mean, the speed of change is unprecedented. And really, when you think about change, it used to be about efficiency and effectiveness, but now the speed of change is such that if you don't change with the world, your learners are actually left behind, and you lose credibility with your learners. So what's really important if you're going to be a CLO that stays pace with the world is, in my view, you have to delegate or actually have a function that helps you as a CLO stay pace with what's going on in the world. So, an R&D function is really important in today's environment, I think, because the pace of change is so dramatic. So having some dedicated resources that support you through that, as an R&D, as an example, is one critical area. Two, I think you just have to stay pace with what's happening in the world. So, whether you do that through publications, personally, it's publications for me, but it's also belonging to professional organizations like the Corporate Executive Board, CUX, ATD, and also Burson. I mean, those are great resources to help you get your arms wrapped around what's going on in the world. A third area I would say is really important in staying pace is that of benchmarking. So making sure that you're pressing the envelope in what you do every day, and that can be done with lots of great organizations on the outside who really push and pull on your thinking. And then lastly, as a learning professional, I think it's just incumbent upon you to be curious, to have this agility, this learning agility that I referred to earlier. We must be agile just like we expect our learners to be agile, and just like we expect our organizations to be agile. And we have to push ourselves, and then in turn push our teams to have that level of curiosity about how we do our business, because the world is dramatically changing. So I guess I would identify those four things as really critical. So when you think about the structural implications for the changing world, one is you have to create the right environment, which means that you have to have a structure that supports learning and growth within your own team. So you have to develop the capabilities with your own team. And I think so often we're like the cobbler's children. We as a learning organization, don't invest enough in our own teams. And too often we've gotten there through what I would call very linear design, very structured linear design, and the world is not linear anymore. And we have to shape the thinking of our own teams, which means you either have to hire the right people or you have to create an environment to help them push their thinking into the next age as well. So structurally, I think you just have to really be thinking about what's happening with your team. Are you pressing the envelope? Have you identified what's really critical for capabilities with your own team? Do you have those capabilities on staff? And if you don't, how do you develop towards those capabilities? Also structurally, like I mentioned, in the changing world, one of the things I think you have to do is really design a strong vision of where you're at today, where you need to be. What are the inhibitors between here and there? What's the future look like? What are you running to? What's the map? How are you tracking against that map? Who's accountable? How are you bringing your team along with that? And how are you keeping your team current? So what's the best way to promote business alignment within the organization from the CLO chair? So everybody talks about business alignment. I mean, we've been talking about business alignment for years. From my viewpoint, to really attach yourself to business alignment, you have to be really connected and sitting within the business. That means you have to have a consultative mindset, a partnership mindset, and you have to be willing to share accountability for the outcomes. So in my world, and at least in terms of how I think about it, I think about a CLO who has the same level of accountability to the business outcome as the business. And if the business sees me not as an L&D professional, but as a partner, accountable for the same business result for their business outcomes, then I think we all win. So that accountability for the same metrics is really critical. And I think so often as an L&D, we want to talk about ourselves as partners, but the reality is, in my space at least, I hold myself accountable for the same results that my business needs to achieve. And so you have to align with that level of accountability. So the work that you're doing is prioritized against business imperatives, and you're delivering the business outcomes that the business expects. And the other thing that I do in my world is I hold my team accountable, not just me, not just my direct officers, but the team below them. They're actually accountable for the business metrics. So they live and breathe that accountability, and we align our personnel against the business, and then we hold them accountable for the same metrics as the business is accountable for, and we get agreed upon metrics that we both share in, right? That we both agree that we're striving for, so that alignment from the beginning. And then the other thing we do is, that I think is really important, is transparency around those metrics. So we at Farmers, we do a lot of scorecards that are aligned to those strategic imperatives. They're monthly. They show the business outcomes, the level 4 outcomes. They're published. They're transparent, all the way from the CEO down and inclusive of our board. And the last thing I think that has functioned well for us is this concept of having a council, if you would, that guides you with the business, that helps you strategically align with the business, not just at the business unit level, but to make sure that you're working on the right priorities for the organization. So that whole accountability imperative is really important, that transparency of results, and then lastly, that linkage that says, look, not only are we working on what's important to the business, but is there a group that helps define that organizationally that we're heading in the right direction, that we're supporting the organization in the way the organization wants to be supported. So what are we working on for 2015? So without sharing a lot of proprietary information that would be very specific to Farmers, I think organizationally what we're trying to do as a learning business is we're really trying to move ourselves away from structured learning into a continuous learning environment, to move ourselves away from event-driven work to continuous learning environment. And we're doing some of that work through what we call guided learning journeys. So learning events that transpire through multiple modalities over the course of a long time frame, sometimes 6 to 9 months. We're also doing interesting things like campaigns where we have multiple modalities going on, trying to change through this concept of ADCAR, which is a change management structure, trying to move the broader organization along in some critical imperatives like coaching and management discussions. So we're really trying to move away from this event-driven work into continuous learning events. And then, of course, we're attempting to take advantage of technology like everyone is. Videos are really, really important. I think an important modality now, not necessarily that new, but I think becoming a very social and important modality. So we're continuing to try to move ourselves forward in that space as well. And so, just a couple critical things that we're working on going forward into next year.